Hello and welcome back to the channel. I'm Mr. Sensible. I'm glad to see that so many of you have made yourself comfy already. Today we're going to have a look at Orphan Red, who has changed her name to Mensa. She has a video that's presented by a guy called Voiceover Pete, but it appears as though she's written the script. So we'll have a listen to what Voiceover Pete, voice for Mensa Girl, has to say. Before we do, a quick thanks to all my patrons. Massive thanks as ever to all my patrons, including new patrons number 6, Corpus Defectus, Tiffany Hall, Erebathron, Bardtail, Francis Chimenti and William Foley, and my newest patrons Alice Vangstrom, John Roswell and TechBlog. Thank you all very much. So Voiceover Pete, I think you better pass on what you've been instructed by Mensa Girl. Roll VT.
Let's talk about
sex, baby. Let's talk about you and me. Let's talk about
truth, belief, knowledge, and the flat earth theory.
Oh, how embarrassing.
One of the most important aspects of the flat earth theory is that it focuses us to ask ourselves, how do we distinguish what we know to be true from what we simply believe to be true?
Well, that would be evidence. That's why we test, measure. We come up with an idea, we test it to see if there's evidence to support it. If there is, then we can know it to be true. At least as far as it goes, until some better idea comes along with stronger evidence. But meanwhile, yeah, the thing with the best evidence is the thing that we know to be true. What we don't do is pull stuff out of our butts and say, yeah, that'll do.
Some people turn to science for help with this, but real science can never offer us truth.
Well, there's a difference between truth, in quotes, that religions might seek, and something being true, like the sky looks blue. You're very tall. And if I drop this pen, it will hit the floor.
The best science can ever say is, here's a useful theory that seems to describe the elements of our world in a way in which it's useful to us for our current purposes.
That's right. If you want to design an aircraft, then you're going to take aerodynamics into account, the structure of the aircraft, the metallurgy of the materials and so on, and you'll design according to the best way you can, and that will be following methods that are tried and tested, that can be evidenced to be good.
The conclusions drawn aren't truth. They're simply our best understanding of our reality based on the limited information we have available to us in this particular moment.
Well, it sounds like you're trying to downplay it. You can only base things on evidence that you have so far, which is why you keep looking for more and stronger evidence, either to support that theory or some newfangled theory that someone's come up. That's fine too, because that new theory may be better, may have stronger evidence, may be the way to move forward.
Science can look at swans and collect data about their color. The collected data can be analyzed, put through a statistical analysis software, interpreted through ideas about colors and feathers, and from this we can draw the conclusion that all swans are white.
Well, taking that as an example and using the photographs behind you as the evidence, every single swan, 100% of those swans were white. So having a theory that swans are and must and always will be white is a pretty good place to start, because at that point there is no evidence to support swans of any other colour. You could go looking, and if you still don't find any, yep, that's a good stand to take. Swans are white.
We can replicate this study and come to the same conclusion again and again. And then some lunatic from the lunatic fringe might come along claiming to have seen a black swan, but he's crazy. Black swan conspiracy theorist. So, science, as it's practiced today, will ignore him.
I notice you using Super Rat's map behind you when you're talking about some lunatic. Anyway, yeah, okay, someone comes along and says, hey, I've seen a black swan. So what do? We listen to them and then say, have you got any evidence of that? Do you have a couple of his feathers? Have you got a photograph of it? Did you catch one? Can we see it? That's fair enough, because up till now, 100% of swans we have seen are white.
Or simply mock him and ridicule him because we don't have the time for a meeting of the Black Swan Society.
We don't have time for a meeting of the Flat Earth Society.
No, science will not ignore him. Science will say, bring some evidence. Explain how this came about. Where did you see this swan? Was anyone else with you that can corroborate what you say you've seen? If you're able to show that, then yeah, the theory that all swans are white will be disproven. And you can adjust your theory. In our case, it would be nearly all swans are white, but the odd one or two is black.
Until someone with influence, prestige, power, and accreditation within the science community steps forward and says, most swans are white, but some are black.
No, so someone would never be ridiculed for just coming up with a new theory. But if there is no evidence, I mean zero evidence to support it, and they're still refusing to accept the current and long-standing and well-evidenced theory, then eventually I can see them getting ridiculed, like, say, flat earthers.
The flat earth theory is very much about insisting that science can be done by individual citizens, that our voices are legitimate.
Well, everyone's voice is legitimate. Anyone can come up with a theory, but they'll have to put forward some evidence. And in order to overturn some existing science, it will need to be observable, testable, repeatable. You'll need to write a paper. You'll need it peer-reviewed. But aside from that, there is nothing to stop you putting forward a theory about blue swans.
It's about the freedom of speech required at the individual level for you to be able to say, I know that some swans are black. I've seen a black swan.
It's not about freedom of speech. You can say whatever you want, but in order for it to be accepted science, you need to evidence it. Like I said, I can come up with a theory of blue swans. Are you going to believe me?
When scientism, as a religion of the state, is insisting that all swans are white and your neighbors are mocking you and ridiculing you for saying that some swans are black.
Well, are you going to mock me about blue swans then? I mean, if I bring you a blue swan, then that's evidence and you would have to accept it. But if I just say I've seen a blue swan, why should you believe me?
It's about freedom of thought, to establish for ourselves what we believe to be true, rather than having to accept what other rulers tell us is true, or what the high priests of scientism tells us is true when their proclamations are based on experiments that we can't verify, much less replicate.
It's got nothing to do with priests. I think it's more to do with you having some idea, perhaps vaguely related to the Bible, not being able to evidence it, and being unhappy that it's not generally accepted and taught in schools. As I said, come up with some evidence, develop a theory, write a paper, get it peer-reviewed, and if the evidence for whatever it is, be that flat earth, blue swans, or whatever, if that is stronger than existing science, it will be accepted. You can overturn all of science if you can prove it.
We can't build particle colliders in our basement and test for ourselves that the Higgs boson really does exist.
Well, have you actually tested the wheel? Have you tested all the permutations of possible shapes just to ensure that circular is the best? If you're going to not believe anything, then you're going to have to start from scratch. Go down to the river and start banging the rocks together to clean your clothes and to make sparks to make fire. Of course, how do you know that banging rocks together is going to make fire? you're going to have to look into that as well. No, we base our lives and understanding on what has gone before. If we improve upon it, then we improve upon it. If what's gone before is the best possible way of dealing with things, then we'll carry on. No, you can't prove about the Higgs boson. It was a massive effort to be able to do that. I'm not quite sure where you're going with this. But if you want to spend your entire life redoing and trying to rediscover what we already know, then you're a fool. And even if you did that, what about your children? Are they going to have to start and do it again?
It's about the power to dissent, to refuse to conform to groupthink, to refuse to pretend to believe in what the group and its leaders have decided we should believe, what we must believe in order to be respected as equals in our societies.
So would you respect me if I absolutely insisted that there are blue swans, having never shown you a blue swan? Not a photo, not a feather, not a live or even a dead animal. But if I carried on insisting that there are blue swans, you're going to respect that belief. If you do respect that belief, then you're an idiot. Because what about my other theory about checkered swans, tartan swans? There's some of those around as well. You're going to believe that as well? You're going to believe everything, any old crap that comes up without evidence? Because if so, you really are a fool.
In the 1950s, the world was promised a bright future where we would have colonies on the moon, flying cars, holidays in space, and affordable housing for everyone, and glass and metal towers reaching up to the skies.
Well, we can build glass and metal towers that reach up to the skies, but they're rather expensive and not everyone can afford them. And that's got nothing to do with science. That's to do with economics and politics. It's good to aim for things. Okay, they've aimed for holidays on the moon. They've aimed for flying cars, neither of which we've achieved yet. But we have achieved a lot else. So, are you not happy about that? Would you rather we just didn't aim for the stars and instead just grub around with an oxen ploughing fields and barely existing? Science feeds your ass.
Instead, many people find themselves in a dystopic condition today, drowning in debt from a 30-year mortgage for houses not much improved since the 50s.
Well, again, the majority of that is not down to science. There's much more efficient heating systems, much more efficient insulation. There's things like solar panels and so on. But the fact that not everybody in this world can afford them is not down to science.
Or tiny apartments in glossy high rises that cost them 50% of their income in rent and no hope of ever owning their home.
Well, that seems to be more down to capitalism. I am absolutely not against capitalism. But what's that got to do with science?
Adults and taxpayers are saddled with debts and student loans that, didn't lead them to a stable, well-paid salaried job that they had envisioned.
Again, nothing to do with science. If people want to study some esoteric subject that's of no use or is not going to support them in a career, that's their lookout or their poor choice. You're just waffling. You're just waffling because you're not happy with the way things are, which is fine, but it's not science.
In medicine, the hoped-for panaceas of what we feel science promised us have yet to be found by a medical establishment that our government can no longer afford to fund.
But there are amazing things in medicine. So many cancers can now either be held back or even treated. The AIDS, the life expectancy of people with HIV is phenomenal compared to what it used to be like. You've got things like MRI scanners, CT scanners, that can look inside your head and your body. But none of that is of value because we haven't cured every single thing. We have made vast strides. It is expensive. And if a government chooses to spend money on other things, then that's the choice of those politicians and the voters who put those politicians in place. It's not science. Scientists just want to discover. They want to find something new. They want to improve things.
And yet our institutions keep promising us, give us more taxpayer money in another 10 years, we'll fly you to the moon for a well-deserved adventure.
Well, I think just purely from the point of view of fuel cost, even if the cost has plummeted from what it was back in the 60s, it's still going to be phenomenally expensive and very, very dangerous unless we develop even more better, safer, stronger, more reliable systems. And that all costs money, a shed load of money. So who's going to pay it? Your average Joe in the street so he can have 2 weeks on the moon? I think not. It's only ever going to be something for the rich. Unless you like to stump up a bit, in which case, hey, I'm up for a week on the moon.
But at the end of the 10 years, another 10 years are found to be needed. And in the 67 years since the Americans have landed on the moon, supposedly, we have yet to send anyone back for a holiday.
What's this about bleeding holidays? Listen, if you're so worried, why don't you, with your zetetic view on science, you just want to discover everything for yourself, build your own moon rocket and go there yourself? Or can't you do it? I think you need a lot of people, a lot of science, a lot of support, and one hell of a lot of money.
Scientism isn't meeting the needs of human beings, and the results of scientism isn't improving society for the average person.
Oh, isn't it? Life expectancy is massive compared to what it was just a few decades ago. You have all the food you want. You can jet round the world and see amazing places. You're kept alive by science. Without science, I'm not sure of your age, but back in the Middle Ages, you'd be dead. Science has improved everybody's lives. Not everybody's is perfect, but it's massively better than it was likely to have been without all the science and the scientific advancements.
Real science can improve our lives by helping us to make a sense of our world and a place within it.
Science doesn't concern itself about our place within the world. Science finds out about things. How things work, why things work the way they do, how we can change them to improve things for ourselves.
But blind faith, devotion to science as the source of all truth and the only source of knowledge about the world fails to provide us with truth because the underlying science is always providing new theories.
Well, I've got my new blue swan theory. Has that improved your life? Of course, I've not been able to evidence it, but I'm sure that you're now going to spread the word about blue swans, aren't you?
Truth is always changing.
Facts don't change.
More importantly, it's failing to provide us with a sense of meaning that makes the suffering of life bearable.
The meaning that makes the suffering of life bearable. Sounds like you're living a miserable existence. Sounds like you're trying to make me and everyone else watching this feel as though they're miserable. What could be the answer? I wouldn't be surprised if you would turn around and say, God.
Whereas flat earth theory offers us access to deeper meaning, deeper truths.
Oh, does it now? Deeper meaning and deeper truths when it can't explain sunsets, seasons, the movement of the moon, eclipses, the movement of the planets, how stars rotate. It doesn't explain anything. There's no difference between that and just claiming it's on the back of a turtle or there are fairies at the bottom of the garden. There's no difference. There's no evidence for fairies. There's no evidence for flat earth. It doesn't give you a deeper meaning. it's just a load of tripe. That's not just saying that nobody can come up with an idea like that, but nobody has been able to show any evidence that it's true.
Flat Earth is about freedom of speech, freedom of thought, and the freedom to dissent from what our rulers decide to impose upon us as truth for today.
Oh, you've got freedom to think whatever the hell you want. You haven't got freedom to teach that in schools, though, because it's not correct. We know it's not correct because we have evidence for a globe, no evidence for flat Earth. At all.
So, go research Flat Earth.
And waste your life.
Because freedom matters.
But can you do this?
Because freedom matters. Well, as I said, you're free to believe anything you want. You're entitled to your own opinion, but you're not entitled to your own facts. I hope you've all enjoyed this. Look forward to seeing you all next time. Until then, stay sensible.
Shut up and sit down.